might not realize they're not on mute. So you might want to check your unmute button unless you want to be off mute, and that's totally fine, except when you start accidentally talking in the background. So just be aware of that. And let's see here, share screen. I want to go to this one, this over here.
She's talking to herself.
I am talking to myself. See, we can hear you. Okay. Working. Come on, just practice this. There we go. I got to find the mouse and then move it. There we go. Okay. So, the Sacramento National Wildlife Refuge, I tried to figure out, okay, what am I going to talk about? Because a lot of people, and usually I have my audience raise their hands, but that doesn't work. You know, most of my audience here are Chico-ish area, Glenn County, Tehama County. Most of our audience has been to the refuge. So I wanted to like touch upon the refuge in case there are folks that haven't been to the refuge, some little things about that. But I also wanted to touch about what's currently going on. So I wanted to make it interesting for everyone. So my tagline for the complex is always, a million birds can't be wrong, because we can easily get a million birds every year. But it's also a home for wildlife, recreation, and people. So, and just a reminder, we can hear some of you in the background, so just be aware of that. You may want to mute yourself. So I always like to start with who the complex is. And I say complex instead of saying the whole big name, Sacramento National Wildlife Refuge Complex, because we consist of 5 different refuges. Here's the town of Willows. This is where I live. This is where I am currently. I live in Willows, and let me get my little pointer here. Chico's over here. If you're not familiar with the area, here's the Butte Sink. And the Sacramento Refuge, this is our main refuge. It's the largest, about 11,000 acres, and it has our headquarters and our visitor center. Our visitor center is not currently open, but I can talk about that later. We also oversee Delavan National Wildlife Refuge, which only has, it's only open for hunting and has a photography blind there. We have Colusa National Wildlife Refuge, Sutter National Wildlife Refuge, and Sacramento, whoops, there we go. This is what happens when I'm trying to use a pointer and the mouse all together. And our Sacramento River National Wildlife Refuge. Now, the river is not one big chunk of land. The Sacramento Refuge, you can think of it as one big rectangle, but the Sacramento River is 30 different chunks of land put together. So we have pieces of property all over the place, up and down the river from Red Bluff to Colusa. And then we also have 3 wildlife management areas. The Butte Sink Wildlife Management Area, which is down here. We have Will Creek Lora line, which is over in here and here, these yellow blocks. And then North Central Valley Wildlife Management Area, which includes a visitor area of Llano Seco. So those are all of our units. So we oversee about 70,000 acres here in the Sacramento Valley. So quite a bit. I mostly focus on Sacramento and Colusa because those are the visitor areas that most people want to visit, as well as Llano Seco. So I like to always start back in time. Before we're a home for what we see today, what were we in the past? And if we were to go back 150 years ago to the Willows area, it's the Colusa Plains, and it didn't look anything like what it does today. We would have to eliminate all these trees that are in this image and the power lines, and it would just be this grassy plains. It was very dry, no matter what time of year, and not many. There we go. Am I unmuted now? No. Am I unmuted now? Yes, no.
I can hear you.
Okay, okay.
Yes, Laura, you're unmuted.
They muted everyone, and it did me too. So luckily it showed up on the screen. So if we were to go back 150 years, it was a very dry, grassy plains. People weren't growing ag here at that time. But as European settlers came to California, it really changed the dynamics of California. They started altering the water. They wanted to have control over the water, when we had water year round and where the water was. And so by altering the rivers, it stopped a lot of the natural flooding. So here in Willows, we didn't have that natural flooding on the Colusa Plains on the Sacramento Refuge. But over closer to the river, we would have natural flooding of the rivers every year. And these birds were coming down from Alaska, Canada, and Russia to spend the winter. And on those natural wetlands, they'd be spending the winter. And millions of birds would come down to spend the winter here. But what has happened is over time, European settlers altered the flow of water, and California has lost over 90% of its natural wetlands. So I tried to put a star approximately where the Sacramento Refuge is. So it's off the natural flooding plain of the Sacramento River, but all of these natural wetlands have disappeared, or almost all of them. So the Sacramento Refuge and Delavant and Colusa and Sutter were created to provide a home for these birds. And in the 30s, right before we were created, as people were doing agriculture, rice and hay and wheat at that time, birds were just coming down, and these nice wet fields worked perfect for them. They lost their natural wetlands, so where else to go? These natural agricultural areas. Now I'm going to read the shot. I know it's probably small for many of you, but it says almost 20,000 pintails devouring standing rice about 60 years ago. This was the kind of scene that would give rice farmers heart attacks. Fortunately, this photo was not from a commercial rice crop, but rather a stand planted on Sacramento National Wildlife Refuge to alleviate the off-refuge rice depredation. In the area in the middle, and that is in here, where the ducks are more widely spaced, notice not only the grain has been consumed, so grain and rice right here, but all the straw has too. So in the 30s, 20s and 30s, as these birds would come down and agricultural was going on, these birds were devouring their natural fields. And you could imagine you're growing your crops for the last 6 to 9 months. All of a sudden, it's fall, September, October, and your crops are gone overnight. And so it was important to create a place for the birds to be able to go, since we lost those natural wetlands. And so this is how Sacramento National Wildlife Refuge got created back in 1937. So originally we were planting rice for the birds before we knew better today to just have natural wetland plants. Also going on at the same time was market hunting. Folks would come up and kill hundreds, if not thousands of birds at one time to ship. They'd stick them on trains, ship the birds down to Sacramento and San Francisco for the wealthy to eat. And the common person didn't have a place to go hunting. So it was important at that same time to prevent the mass hunting, the market hunting. And this picture on the right had 325 birds in it. It's hard to actually see that. It looks like, a couple dozen, but this is right near the refuge back in 1921 with 325 birds. And, if you look at that pile of birds compared to these other shots, that's hundreds and hundreds of birds. So it was important to provide this habitat for them. So we wanted to give a place for the birds for the habitat. They're not eating crops, so crop depredation, but also protecting the birds from these mass hunters, but allowing hunters in a safe way to be able to harvest animals. So back in 1937, we got our start. And back in the 30s, we had the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, who helped build the refuge back at that time. Without them, the refuge wouldn't be what it is today. A lot of our ponds and checks and roads are originally from them back in the 30s. And there was hundreds of men here at the time building the refuge out in the summer. And you can see how few trees were here back then, building it all by hand. You can imagine over here in Willows in 110 degrees in July what it's like. out there working the hard jobs. But that's what built what we have today. And I'm going to keep drinking water so I don't cough. But that's how we have the habitat we have today, the home we have today for all these birds that come here. But who does come here? If we're going to focus on the geese first, these are the three main species of geese that we get. The white geese, I call them white because oftentimes they're hard to differentiate, but we have the snow geese and the Ross's geese. You can kind of look at the red areas for the snow geese and the blue, yellow for the Ross's geese. And they're coming from Alaska, Canada, and even as far away as Russia. Way up here at the top of the screen is Wrangel Island, and that's technically Russia. We also get these dark gray birds called white-fronted geese, and they're coming from Alaska. We have a couple different spots in Alaska where they're coming from, and they're traveling thousands of miles to come here to spend the winter. Most of them are spending their winter in the valley, the Central Valley. White geese wise, we didn't have a survey this year of all the white geese. They have to do it by plane and with close quarters, and the pandemic, it didn't happen. But we have over 1 million, I want to say maybe 2 million white geese that tend to spend the winter in the Central Valley. So those are the geese that we're seeing. For some of these birds, they're traveling really, really far. I didn't know if Steve McDonald was on here. I know Hazel's on here. I'm using a lot of their photos. But Steve photographed this bird at Calusa back in 2012. Okay, here's Calusa way down here. I'm using my red pointer on my mouse. It came from way up here. I don't even know the name of that spot in Canada. Directionally, if it flies as Google Earth has mapped it out, that's over 2,000 miles one way, okay? It was banded in 2003, spotted in 2012. The collar hair used to be yellow, but it's completely faded. It's that old. This bird at that point had traveled over 38,000 miles. 2,000 one way, 2,000 back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So these birds are logging lots and lots of miles to be able to travel here to have a spot in the winter that's safe and providing lots of food for them. In terms of ducks, a lot of our ducks are not breeding up in the same areas as the geese. They're coming from what we call the prairie potholes. And this is a place in kind of middle America here, you could say, of Canada and the United States, these natural potholes formed by glaciers that provide these nice little pools of water in the summer. And so a lot of our mallards, our teal, like the screaming teal, shovelers, and pintails are coming from these areas. And most of them are coming to the Pacific Flyway to spend their winter here in California. So oftentimes in the winter, our biologists are getting out there monthly and doing their surveys. A little harder this year, excuse me. But for our birds, I took this survey from 2016 because it gives us great numbers of my over 1 million birds. We have white-fronted geese. You can see the top line. White geese for Sacramento that day was over 52,000 geese. So we get a lot of ducks and geese on the refuge. We typically have the most numbers in November and December. That's the highest concentration on the refuges. And the reason is because typically during that time, the rain hasn't started yet. Kind of like this year, the rain really hasn't started yet. And after the rain starts, there tends to be more habitat surrounding us where the agricultural lands are now becoming habitat for them once it rains and they're harvested. So this is how we get that 1 million geese and ducks on the refuge, or refuges around the complex. So why are we here? What's our purpose for the complex? We provide habitat for migratory species. That's our number one thing, is providing that space and home for them. Providing and preventing crop depredation. You can see in this bottom picture, this is rice, and where you see open water, that has been eaten by birds. So you can see standing rice and rice that's been eaten. In recent years, we haven't had as much crop depredation from the geese because with modern technology, they're harvesting the rice actually very, very quickly with the modern machines. We also protect endangered and threatened species such as the giant garter snake. And we're also a place for recreation. And that's what we have for today, this habitat for all these species. So a regular day on the refuge, a nice sunny day with calm winds, we can see pictures like this right from the auto tour. I can apologize for my cough. I do not have COVID. It's just I'm not used to talking nonstop. So how do we provide this home for wildlife? How do we create this? It just doesn't naturally happen. We have a staff and a crew that their job is all summer long, essentially, working nonstop to provide this habitat. It just doesn't naturally happen on its own. Controlling water, mowing and disking plants that we do and don't want, spraying a lot of non-natives, disking fire to burn off habitats that are too thick or preventing species we don't want. And on some places such as Calusa, we even bring in sheep. They will knock out plants very quickly. But water is one of our key things. A lot of people don't realize we just don't snap our fingers and water ends up on the land. It takes a lot of work controlling the water. And so each pond that is out there has these culverts. This one they had just redone on the left here. So I took a picture so you can see we have these boards that go in that block the water. It's acting as a natural dam. And so as the water comes in, they can dam it up and keep the water in there. And as we change boards in and out, that's how we can increase or decrease water levels. And it's all about the water. Again, we don't snap our fingers and it appears. Where this yellow arrow is up near kind of Hamilton City is where our water is initially coming from. It's coming off the Sacramento River. And we get our water through the Glen-Calusa Irrigation District, GCID. They have thousands of miles of canals, laterals, and drains to get the water to us. Our water is coming in up here and over here and over here to come in to get to our 11,000 acres just on Sacramento alone. So once it gets to Sacramento Refuge, within ourselves, we have thousands of culverts, like I showed earlier, to move that water around. So it's quite a process. So a lot of folks wonder, why don't we have all of our water on instantly in October and September and November? Because we're slowly bringing it on. Slowly, because a lot of our birds often aren't there yet in September, so there's no reason to flood it all up. Once we get the water on, the food starts degrading. So we want to make sure we have enough food for these birds to get through the winter when it's cold and they need those calories. But this image, this is just the north half of Sacramento. All these arrows are coming from a culvert showing how water's coming on and off the refuge in all these lands. And one guy takes care of all the irrigation for Sacramento. So he's got an important job. I couldn't keep all of this straight. But not only are we a home for the wildlife, but we're a home for recreational activities. We want visitors to come. Driving the auto tour on Sacramento and Calusa, you can see bald eagles, such as this one here up in a tree, and lots of birds. So we want to provide those opportunities for people. So if you haven't been to the Sacramento Refuge, we kind of cut ourselves in half. We have I-5 to our west. The south half of the refuge, this orange area, is hunting. We only have hunting for waterfowl on Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. Up here, the green area is the auto tour. It's 6 miles. Then we also have this blue area up here. That's the wetland walk, 2 miles. We don't have many trails, but we do have this spring trails that are open February 15th through June 30th. It's not open during the winter because of bird disturbance, but also that's our hunting area. So right now, for another month or so, it's just this northern area where visitors are able to go, the average visitor to go birding. So when you arrive at the refuge, if you haven't been here, you're going to come in from this west side, drive the entrance road in. You can park here. The visitor center is currently closed, but we have a building over there with restrooms, and you can walk the 2-mile wetland walk trail, but you're not going to see as much wildlife on that as you will out on the one-way 6-mile auto tour. So this time of year, you want to drive this 6 miles. This extra 1.5-mile loop is open in the summer, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But on the auto tour, you're going to stay in your vehicle, but there's 3 places you can get out of your vehicle. And those are called park and stretch areas. Those areas are used to people. If you get out anywhere else on the auto tour, what happens is the birds fly off. And we don't want that to happen. We want others to enjoy the birds. But also those birds need to conserve their calories. They don't want to be burning calories for humans. They want to be burning them for the weather, cold weather. Also when eagles come through to fly off then. So it's very important that we stay in those vehicles. We can pull over, take lots of photos, stop, just stay inside your vehicle. It acts as a natural blind. Okay. So pool 2 here, we have it open March 15th through September 10th. And that time of year, we have very little water on the refuge. So this one pond becomes the heart of everything going on. Since most of these birds are only here in the winter, pool 2 is kind of the heart of activity on the north half of the refuge in the summer. And so that's a great place to see grebes. Now, granted, in the summer, it's a whole different world. It's very hot, very dry, and this is the only game in town for water. But the auto tour is the happening place. That's where a lot of our visitors are going. Here at Sacramento Refuge, last year we had over 115,000 people come to visit. Huge. This year, with the pandemic, lots of people are getting outside, and we've had 3 times our normal visitors this year, just in the last couple months. So it's a great place for people to get out, stretch their legs, and keep a safe distance from others and enjoy this wildlife. But we do have hunting on the refuge, the south half of the refuge, 3 days a week. For waterfowl, it's all very regulated. But we also typically have a lot of family and school programs for visitors on weekends and during the week. This right now, a lot of it's on hold or on digital platforms. Calusa is another refuge that a lot of folks like to visit. To point out where we are here, we've got Highway 20. Okay, Sac Refuge is up here. This is the small map. We've got Calusa down here. We've got Highway 20 coming across, Highway 45 going up and down. The town of Calusa is right here. So as you go to Calusa, you turn on O'Hare Road, and then you enter the refuge. The auto tour there is 3 miles. It's 2-way in this section and then 1-way on this loop. Okay. Here you cannot get out on the auto tour, but we do have a platform in the very beginning, and that's a great place to be able to get out and view birds. Very, very popular there. Many years ago, we had a rare bird there. I can't remember how many years now, at least 5, 6, 7. And the falcon duck allowed all the birds to realize how many people can be there, and it's safe. So the birds are now pretty used to all these people being there on the platform. And it's allowed visitors to get phenomenal photos. I call them the big camera club, but a lot of folks show up with their big cameras and get phenomenal photos of birds because the birds are coming in right in front of you. So it's a pretty cool spot. We also have Llano Seco. Llano Seco is over closer to Chico than Willows. It's about 30 minutes for where I am here, off of County Road Z and 7 Mile Lane. And it's a great place to be able to see sandhill cranes. Sandhill cranes don't tend to be on the refuge. They tend to prefer more agricultural lands and also the east side of the river. For whatever reason, they prefer the east side of the river. And so it's a great place to be able to see these sandhill cranes. One very popular thing for visitors, especially earlier in the fall, late October through I'd say early January. I don't know if there's a whole lot of fly off going on now. It's not as spectacular, but it is very weather and bird dependent. This thing called fly off. So what happens is all of these birds are hanging out on the refuge all day long. They know it as the safe area, and they're resting and preening and just hanging out all day long. Well, hunting ends at sunset, and the birds have learned over the last 80 years or so that hunting ends at sunset. And so as the sun sets, the birds will take off, and they pretty much take off all at the same time, approximately, usually over about 30 minutes or so. And it's pretty spectacular. I highly recommend coming over and seeing the fly off on the Sacramento Refuge earlier in the season. Right now, there's a little bit of it, but it's not this mass chaos of birds leaving like it is earlier in the season. So it's pretty spectacular. But now, with the current changes that are going on in the current situations, we've had to change what we're doing interacting with visitors. With the visitor center closed, we're doing virtual programs pretty much for visitors. We have our social media, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, and we're constantly putting information out there to visitors. And we've done quite a few programs for visitors on Facebook. And we're going to be start doing here in the next couple of weeks, educational programs. Typically, we have 1,000 kids that come to the refuge every year. That's been put on hold. And so we're going to be doing it digitally to try to get into their classrooms. There's probably there's some questions, and I'm going to get those in just a second because I can't see both screens currently. So the other thing that's currently going on, one thing I'm missing out on is my youngest visitors. The 2 to 6-year-olds, typically they'd come inside the visitor center, play with the little toys and stuffed animals we have, and that's how they connect. Going on a drive with, that aged, and they're not usually picking out birds and having an adult conversation with everyone else in the vehicle. So I've had to come up with other ideas. And one thing we're currently doing is something called a story walk. And they can walk a small section of trail because they have little legs. They can't do the full 2 miles, and read a book at the same time. This way they're not touching anything, and it helps to motivate them along the trail. So the book I currently have on display is, I can't read it from here, I think it's The Bird Watcher is what it's called. And it's about this grandfather and grandchild, Jess, I think it's a boy, going birding. And it's page by page along the walk for them to be able to read and interact and have fun with it. But another thing a lot of folks are needing are their permits and their passes. And I'm going to put this in the chat here in a little bit, all these links here as well. But a lot of people come to us for their duck stamps and for their interagency senior passes and their refuge pass. And so I've had to go online for all of these as well. And these passes, you can go online, purchase them there at Rec Access. All the links will be there. And we'll mail the duck stamp or the passes to you to make life a lot easier. So you don't have to physically interact with us or us with you. And also with the bookstore inside, Altacal runs the bookstore there. We've had to put that online as well, just so they can stay afloat. The bookstore's been shut down since March, same as the visitor center. So we now have that online as well. So you can scan it with your phone, take a picture, and it'll go right to the website. And I can put that in the link below as well. So we're just getting that up and going. So if you want to do purchases, just let us know. So we remember to look at the website to make sure we have your purchase ready. And we're going to be shipping and doing pickup outside. So we'll have a bag ready for you. If you're planning to come over and you're like, oh, I need a t-shirt or whatnot, we can have that ready for you. Recently, we've also gotten a friends group, and this has just kind of occurred in the last couple of months. Friends of the Sacramento National Wildlife Refuge. It is for the whole complex, but to be less wordy, they're just saying in their friend's name, Sacramento. And they have a website up and going and a Facebook group. And on their Facebook group, they're sharing lots and lots of pictures and information about the refuge as well. So definitely a great group to help support the refuge, just like Altacal. So the future, what's the future of the refuge? Well, with the increase in visitors over the last several years and trying to do educational programs and having a visitor center, we're kind of out of space in our building. And so it's been in the works for quite a while. And we're hoping this spring, the renovations start to increase the building size. It's kind of doubling in size. We're going to have a real visitor center. Currently, if you've been to our building, it's a hallway, essentially. It's a glorified hallway with stuffed animals. And so I'm hoping to have a real building with real exhibits and real information for visitors, and a room set aside specifically for environmental education. So we're very excited for that. We're hoping for renovations to start in April, but we haven't heard anything yet. So we're still hoping for April. But with the refuge, we do provide this home for a variety of wildlife that comes here during the winter time. And it provides a spectacular view of the birds in all stages of their wintering migration here on the refuge. No matter where you visit, when you visit, there is great wildlife to see. No matter what day of the week, it's just different every day of the week or every time you go around the auto tour. You just never know what you're going to see as you visit the refuge. Big or small, the critters are here and providing that great view and entertainment for us that we need this time of year, providing that peace of mind and space that we need from others. Some you want to keep more space from. But I hope you all enjoyed it and you're all able to come to visit us at the Sacramento Refuge. We're a great place to visit this time of year. So let me flip over so I can see questions here. Let's see here. Put it over on this screen and I was like, oh, I can do this at the same time. No, here we go. Okay, I'll stop sharing. There we go. Now I can see. Okay, try to hit some of these questions. So folks, you can unmute yourself and ask a question. You can raise your hand and ask a question. You could write it into the chat and ask a question. I'm totally fine with any of those. So thank you, thank you. Let's see here. So where are they going at fly off? Excellent question. So what happens is the birds are in the refuge all day, just like the picture here. And at sunset, they're flying off to go feed. They're actually feeding really heavy at night. And so they're going out to the farm fields. So during the winter, farm fields are great for the birds to go to. The farmers are totally on board with it because the crops have been taken off already. The rice has been harvested. So what's left behind is the rice stubble. And that's kind of the bottom of the rice. You could say like your grass part of it, the base. And any rice that's fallen onto the ground, the birds go in and eat that. So they're going in there, mixing it up, eating and pooping, which actually the farmers like because it helps degrade any leftover rice straw that's out there. So it's actually really helpful for the farmers. Yep. You were there on Saturday to see the fields of snow geese, but not too many this year. Were we too early? No. So what's currently happening? We're not having huge numbers of birds right now. So what we've kind of seen is a lot of birds have left already. And we're not able to get up and do the aerial surveys, which we usually want to do this time of year to find out where are the birds. We haven't had the rain, so the rain is not naturally on other farm fields around us. So we think a lot of the birds have left and gone north. It hasn't been harsh weather. Usually the Klamath Basin north of us can get some harsh weather. It freezes over oftentimes, and all those birds there are forced to come down, including an increase in eagles. But this year, it's been pretty mild. So a lot of the birds have left. And it's not that they've left because it's warm weather. It's partially that, but it's also food. We don't know if they're finding enough food nearby. And what we've seen in the mornings is typically in the mornings, the birds are coming back 7, 8, 9 in the morning. And this year they're not. They're all returning after 11 a.m. And why? My guess is they're going farther and farther to find food. And so by the time they're coming back, it's after 11 in the morning. So we're thinking food might be the issue, but again, we don't have 100% answer of that this year. But this is typically the good time of year, but weather is key. Sunny days and not too windy. So today was super windy. So my guess is a lot of them were out feeding, just adding on those calories because they're burning more calories to stay warm on these windy days. Next question is, how many staff and volunteers do you have at the refuge? Pre-COVID, typically our maximum staff is about 30, but we're short a lot of positions right now. So I would say our staffing levels of permanent staff is about 22. Typically I have 10 to 20 volunteers for all kinds of different things. This year, with COVID, I'm allowed a total of 2 people in the building. Typically the building has about 15 people plus in it. And that's, people answering phones, doing emails and reports and managers and biologists and all these different folks. And right now it's me and I have 3 staff, and then we have an admin person. So we have to switch days in and out of the building and who's inside or outside. So it's a lot more challenging this year to keep all of us safe, just so we have no issues amongst us sharing and spreading germs. Okay. Yes, there's some of the photos are from the photography blinds. I think a lot of the photos I usually grab from folks that donate them to the refuge here. A lot of them are just taken on the auto tour, so it's the same type of picture that the average person can take. But we do have 4 photography blinds. They're very difficult to get into because we only have 4 of them. And those photography blinds, some of them you do have to have waiters to get out to there, and you have to get out to those photography blinds an hour before sunrise. So that can be a challenging for visitors as well to get out there. And the reason we want you out there before sunrise is because typically the birds are coming back at sunrise. So that way you don't scare all the birds and you have no photos at all of anything. Let's see here. Kate was at Gray Lodge today and there was not many snow geese. Were they sheltering for the wind or what? My guess is that's part of it, but my guess is also some of them have left as well. So Gray Lodge, I don't know their current numbers over there, but my assumption is they're seeing the same thing as us with a decrease in birds. Will the refuges be expanding any of the lands? Yes and no. Our boundaries were kind of scaled in by the government 15 years ago, maybe. I don't know the year offhand. So we are limited. We can't just take over all land. Land that's within that set boundary has to be for sale, and that seller willing to sell to the government if it's a piece of land that we would want. For example, there was a small piece of land near County Road 68 that was for sale. It was between 99W and the freeway, very tiny piece of land that went up for sale. And so to help prevent anything big coming in to disturb the birds, we worked with partners to purchase that land. They purchased it for us and then turned it over to us. So we're not going to be getting huge chunks of land, but there are structures within our boundaries or pieces of property within our boundaries that we could eventually take. Thank you, Laura. Thank you. Can you talk about the other units to visit? Yes. So we have the Calusa Refuge that I mentioned with the 3-mile auto tour and the platform. We have Llano Seco, which is out there as well. And then, excuse me, the other one is the Sacramento River. And during the winter, I don't go much into Sacramento River just because it's not what most people are looking for. Most people are looking for what I have behind me here of birds, waterfowl. And the Sacramento River is more forested and grasslands. It does go along the river, but it's not always views of the river on all those different properties. But we have 7 of those properties that have parking lots that people can access to go for a walk. The closest one to Chico being the Pine Creek unit off of Highway 32. So from Chico, as you're going west on 32, before you go on the bridge over to Hamilton City, on the left, there's a large grassland there, and that's our Pine Creek unit. And we have trails there. I'm guessing on mileage, maybe 3 miles worth of trails. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, don't discard the plants too. Yes, we have lots of great plants. I am not a plant expert, as Linnea could tell you here. Most people are coming here to view the birds. Okay. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself if you have questions.
Do you have a duck box project?
We do have some wood duck boxes on Sacramento, Delavan, and Colusa. With the pandemic, it's been challenging. Last year, I just canceled all the volunteers because typically it's a mix of folks, and I don't want people getting in the same bubble that aren't necessarily in the same household bubble. So yes, at Colusa, I have a man and a wife down there who do all the wood duck boxes there. For Sacramento and Delavan this year, we probably won't be having anyone checking boxes due to the pandemic again, but we do have some wood duck boxes. It's not as big and organized as Gray Lodge.
Thank you for your program.
Sure, sure. My favorite bird, I am a raptor person from my years of working with birds of prey. I'm a great horned owl person. That's they're pretty common. Every few trees pretty much on the complex you can find them, and they're just starting to get on nests right now on the complex, but that's my favorite bird. Is the Junior Duck Stamp Contest still working and going on? Yes. I am no longer overseeing the program here for California. So what the Junior Duck Stamp program is kids from kindergarten through 12th grade draw a duck, goose, or swan and submit it to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for a contest. And it's, judging the art itself. And it's now being run out of our regional office, and the deadline is February 1st. But with the pandemic, I know it's hit things a little more challenging. What ducks nest on the refuge? I don't have a list in my head per se. Mallards, Canada geese. We have a mix of other birds. We don't have a huge number just because it's so hot and so dry here in the summertime. So you got to think, if you are a parent bird, you want to have lots of food for your family. So having not shrinking habitats, but shrinking water levels. This California in the valley here is not a huge area for a lot of birds to nest for waterfowl specifically. So we do have some, but there's not many compared to many other places in the US. Delavan is only open at this time for hunting and for the photography blind. That's the only access for visitors. Long term, we do have plans for a platform. It's just we need the staffing and the funding to be able to do that. So typically for National Wildlife Refuges, we acquire a piece of land, and then with staffing and money, then we can open it for human activities. And so long term, we do have plans for a platform. It's just not in the cards yet. So same regarding Sutter. Sutter, we have hunting this time of year, 3 days a week, but we do have some trails open there from February 15th through June 30th, if Sutter is not flooded. Some years Sutter is under 10 feet of water, but when it's not underwater, it is open, and there's some really nice trails there and great riparian habitat. So it's actually some really good birding there in April. Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you, everyone.
How is the ringneck pheasant population there? Is it?
We don't keep huge surveys on them. We do maybe a once a year survey. And what the biologists have found is it's approximately 1 bird per mile, and they'll do the surveys in the summer after nesting season. But if you were to look at the surveys over, 20, 30 years, yes, numbers are down. And what the state is finding is a lot of it has to do with surrounding properties. So it's not just us, but if you think of us, I gotta get to another image here and I can share it. Let's see over here. you think of us, we're kind of an island amongst farming. Let's get to this image. Nope, not yet. Do screen 2 and go here. Nope, didn't work. Okay, gotta go back through it. Tried, it didn't work. I'll go screen by screen. So we are in an island. So we're, 11,000 acres, which is a good sized piece of property. But when we have, hundreds of thousands of acres of rice fields surrounding us and walnuts and almonds, it starts to limit. So if you were to look back in history here on what surrounding properties looked like, there was a lot more grassy. It wasn't as clean as it is today for the farming. There was a lot more weeds, you could say. They weren't weeds, but plants really growing up and giving a lot more habitat for pheasants. Today, if you look around the refuge, there's not a whole lot of extra habitat for them off the refuge. So it's really isolated a lot of them to the refuge where we have grasslands with lots of other plants there to provide nesting. And then another key for pheasants is wet springs. So we have lots of bugs, grasshoppers and things. Not every spring is, right now it's very dry. So we're probably not going to have that abundance of insects that they need, but it's also predators. With the increase in people, there's an increase in trees. And when you have an increase in trees, that's providing habitat for great horned owls and red-tailed hawks, eagles, etc. So it's this mix of many different things. Did I not share my screen? Is that what happened? Oh, well, but it's a mix of things that have caused them to not keep their numbers up, but it is not a native species. So it's not something we are actively trying to increase their numbers on. Sorry, I thought I was sharing my screen the whole time, but I just had an image of the refuge surrounded by farming land. So.
You have a couple more, Laura.
Okay. Okay. Will the pool 2 extension be open this summer? Yes, it opens. I have to keep all these dates straight. March 15th through September 10th. I have a bunch of dates in my head for all the different activities on the refuge. Are we following state guidelines for reopening the bookstore and facilities? Yes and no. So with the complex, we're falling into many different counties. So our project leader and other managers are keeping it, they're going by the staff trying to keep us the safest. And with a limit of 2 people in the building, it's hard to then open it for visitors when we can only have a max of 2 people in the building. So I don't foresee it opening in the next month or 2. And then with our building being renovated starting in approximately March, April, that's going to close it down as well. So we're trying to help promote selling things in the bookstore so we don't have to box everything up. And I don't know at this time what will occur for the bookstore when the building is being renovated. I don't know at this point for that. So yeah, probably most likely the bookstore probably won't be open for visitors until after the building has finished its renovations. Yeah. Good questions.
Yeah, Laura, thank you so much. I mean,
welcome.
it was a delight to hear your history and your talk on the refuge and all the great questions. I know it's a challenging time, but it's not a challenge to get out to the refuge. Everyone should get out and go see the birds and stay for the fly off. If you don't have a fly off, the evening sunsets are absolutely gorgeous. So.
And I'm getting those links now. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah.
So I'll just, again, everybody give her applause, even if you're muted, but we surely enjoyed it. And I'll bring up a couple of things here. We do have our February and March programs that are going to be delightful too. Our February 15th program is with Mac McCormick. If everybody,
Oh, that's gonna be
Matt.
great.
What's that?
he's quite
The
the
February
entertainer,
one.
so you'll have a lot of fun
He's so funny. He's so smart.
hearing about winter birds, neighbors, and visitors, and the birds of your backyard. And like he says in his write-up, it's time that we actually do get to know our visitors of our backyard, because we sure have a lot of time now to do that. So come and join us February 15th for his talk. And then on March 15th, we have a young, hot, new, well, he's not new, anyway, birder, Liam Huber. He's been birding since he could walk, probably. But he's going to do Rare Bird Alert. He's been out for an entire year documenting and photographing all the birds he's seen in Butte County. So that it will be a special program too. So please all, again, thank you for joining us. And Laura has some links. What do you have, Laura? Anyway, she has links that.
I have two screens, so I've got to get my mouse from one screen to the other. So I stuck up here, I put our rec access. That's for various passes. So you can get a federal duck stamp, a junior duck stamp, the Sacramento day pass, which is $6 to visit just for one day. If you come more than 2 times, you'll want to get the annual pass, which is $12. If you visit a lot of different federal lands, that you can get an interagency passes. So I have that there. I also have the Friends group.
We're not seeing what you just said.
Okay, so what you need to do is take your mouse and press the chat button.
I've got the chat screen open.
Okay, you should be able to see it. If there's an arrow, you might need to click that to show everything, because I shared it with everyone. So you should be able to see it in the link. And Jennifer might be able to do it on the Facebook page as well. And then I just put our website address and then a link to our permits page, which goes to the rec access, and then the bookstore as well.
It's not there.
Let's see.
Carol, I can get it to you.
Okay.
All right,
you.
thank you.
I'll
Can
get it
everyone
to
else
you.
see it?
I don't see it in the chat.
Okay.
All right. Anyway, I'll go ahead and get it to you, but I think most of us can. I don't know why you can. So, but anyway, again, Laura, thanks so much. Great to have you, and we will see you out at the refuge.
Very good. There was one last question there about a salmonella outbreak. I personally don't know anything about it. Someone else might. It is always a great idea, though, to clean your feeders regularly. You can do it with bleach and really let it air dry really well before putting anything back in it, or vinegar, and scrubbing it really well. On the refuge, we have had some cholera outbreak, and that's normal for us. We just have to make sure we get the birds out of the water to help prevent any other birds from getting it. So.
Jennifer, maybe you can answer the question. It seems like there's an eruption of pine siskin, and now we're seeing salmonella. The year we had the band-tailed pigeon eruption, they suffered a disease that went through also. So there's a link maybe between a huge population and a disease outbreak. Dawn told me I should take my feeders down completely for the siskins.
Yeah, I don't know that answer, and Dawn would be the one that really would know more about what's going on with that. And actually, that's the first I heard. I need to take my feeders down and clean them better.
Well,
Right on.
I wasn't worried at first because I seldom get pine siskin, but I do have more this year. And Saturday I saw a sick pine siskin, so that was my motivation. I took them all down.
Pine siskin? What is that?
It's a little bird like a sparrow.
Oh,
I don't, Laura, do you know anything about that?
So I personally, for my yard, I don't typically feed the birds. I have a lot of native plants that have seeds in them, and I don't cut those plants back for them. But it's also fairly warm here. It's not harsh conditions. So there's a lot of natural food out and around us here. So it's, you know, feeding birds is fantastic. At work, we feed our birds there for visitors. We just clean them regularly to help prevent spread of disease. And I, you know, as more birds come when there's an eruption year, I'm not surprised to see disease. That's the natural part of the environment, but it could also be temperature related too. I don't know specifically about this, but you know, it's not very cold here this year. So that could be. So I'm not saying it's 100% that's the answer, but that could be part of it.
And Mary, do you have any thought on that too, or?
Yeah, I've been reading a lot about it, and the pine siskins are having a big outbreak of salmonella. And so, and I have dozens of them in my yard. And one of the symptoms that you see is that you'll see one that's kind of looks fatter. He's like fluffed up and doesn't move around much. And if you have one of those, then you really want to stop feeding for, they say, at least a few days. Sometimes people say for a couple of weeks, take down your feeders and clean them all the time and clean the water, your bird baths. But they also, one thing I did read was that they may have salmonella before they even leave their grounds, because it's just an eruption and there's so many of them together. So it just may be one of those things. And I think it's, you know, kind of a population thing.
Yeah, all good information. Thank you. Okay, so you can all leave now.
Fantastic, Laura. Thank you.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Really good. Thanks.
Bye, everybody. And
Bye,
the
everybody. Thank you
Bye.
for joining us.
Thank you.
See you next month.